Hello, Roberto.
Hi, Mustafa. Nice to meet you.
Pleasure here. Thank you so much for accepting our invite, first of all. And it's a pleasure to meet someone who's working on a technology I haven't worked on. So,
Aha.
before we go
Cool.
into DBT, we would like to know about you because I think this is our first call. I never had a chance to had a one-to-one call with you. So, please, for our audience, introduce yourself, please.
Well, I will try to make it quick because as you see, I have some white hair here, so it would take a lot if I try to go through all the stuff. So I've been doing a lot of things, but in my heart, I am a software engineer. So I started a long time ago with Java and this kind of thing. And then in the last 15, 20 years, I've been mostly working on the data side. And of course, then using Python, SQL, and a lot of stuff. And what I have to say, I've been pretty much lucky. I just recognized this day today because I was going through some other things with a colleague, and that I've been always more or less working with in ELT mode. Even when we work with more legacy thing, I was lucky enough already in 2010 things period like that to be able to work as ELT with the HP Vertica, some at the time very expensive technology and things. So in that sense, my goal is to really bring software engineering
Mhm.
into that engineering because I have lived and in the last month, this last month, I've been going through a lot of these kind of legacy ideas like patterns and things, but they're really, really real. And that is what have changed software engineering from some of a artisanal, Druidistic way of building software into something that now is a good recognized industry that has some nice way of working. So there is an industrial way of building software. We are not yet there with data. So that's where I'm trying to go, and that's the direction that I would like to bring to the industry. So, and I think in the sense that DBT is one important enabling factor into changing the data engineering from this artisanal way of building things, especially data warehouses, into a more industrial, repeatable, automated way of doing. So that's pretty much more than what I am, what I'm trying to do.
No, there's a disclaimer. I started my career as ETL, so ETL engineer. Most of my career, I was a ETL engineer. Then I converted into architect, then solution architect. So I've done some modeling, blah, 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 all those things. So I'm going to give you some tough time today because this
Yes.
is an ELT
I
tool.
love it.
Yeah. So I always, in our podcast, we always try to go into deep technical so our audience can really understand what this technology can do for us. Yeah. So I think before we really go into technicalities, tell us how you got connected with DBT. Tell us about little bit background of DBT itself, and then we jump into technical stuff.
Well, again, let's try to keep things not too big. So I actually started with DBT in a quite indirect way, in the sense that I was head of data at a gaming company, and so I had my data team. We have this goal to get out of Oracle. It's called actually out of Oracle uh, in a certain time frame. And then, of course, we have decided, okay, we like Snowflake that consider 2018, 2019, it was still quite early. So we were the first Snowflake adopters in the Nordics in a gaming industry. And then we say, okay, but we don't really like because the 2, 3 years before, I really tried to get into this team since I joined and owned this team, a way for testing, for good software engineering, because when I arrived, I found the usual 500, 800 rows of SQL that nobody could understand. And I said, of course, that's difficult, but you put yourself in a difficult position by writing that. So there are better ways. But of course, if the tool doesn't help you on build in better way or on doing testing and things like that, it's difficult. And so when we switch to Snowflake, we also had the freedom to pick whatever we wanted. And so I pretty much let free the team go and find whatever good you find around and let's try. So we have the time because when you have to do such a big switch, you also know that you have some time you can dedicate to find better ways. And they came back with a few tools. DBT was one of that. So we start to use that. Back then was DBT Core. We didn't have DBT Cloud yet and so on. And so I actually started with that. But back then, I really did very little. Then I moved with DBT. Then I moved into consulting. And there, I actually start to really use a lot DBT. I actually helped them also get out the first beta of the training materials and so on. And I was training people in my company. And so, in that sense, because I really realized that that was the power to change the way SQL people write CTL. And so, avoiding these 800 rows of
Mm.
SQL with three nested query and maybe two repeated equal, but for a sign that you will never spot when you look at the query. And so and that just ticked me. And so I said, okay, this is the way that we have. And actually, then the company that was not really built on DBT or Snowflake, so they were really ahead with Snowflake. But when we start to adopt DBT, it's become like a wave. And so now we are really working a lot with Snowflake and DBT. So
Uh,
I'm very proud because I have to say,
started right in the early stage.
and
That's great.
sometimes you can say you're lucky, but if I have to go back at university when I was very young, I started to use Java. But there were other languages that were used back then. And then Java became so famous, ubiquitous. So I've been lucky then. And then SQL, that's still here.
Yeah.
And then now DBT. So sometimes you're lucky, sometimes you find the right things. I don't know. But in that sense, I think that getting the right idea, the right technology early is really, really exciting because then you see how they develop. You can feel part of something changing the society.
Yeah, of course, definitely. So now let's go step one towards DBT. So I was doing a little bit R&D on DBT. So DBT is not an ETL tool, it is an ELT tool. So let me draw a little bit picture of ETL and ELT at a very logical level for our audience so they can capture. So traditionally, ETL was and the logical difference for ETL and ELT is normally when a tool reads from source and use source compute to transform and load into target. That's normally an ETL. And ELT is normally when a tool pulls from source, do a transformation, but use a compute of the target side and write into the target. That's a logical ELT. So that's an
Yeah,
ETL, ELT. Yeah.
I agree. I would pretty much make the big distinction is that the ETL, so the transformation is done outside of the source and outside of the target database.
Yes.
So it is usually done in between. So usually it was some server that was running the ETL tool that was gathering the data around and then doing something with this data, and then the result was uploaded
Yeah.
to the target database.
Correct. So
While the ETL, it just fires the SQL, the commands, so it just loads the data as it is, or it doesn't even load. DBT, in many cases, doesn't really load itself, the data. The data is loaded into the target database, and then the ELT tool just fires the SQL to do the transformation inside the target database.
yes.
And so,
We
and
will
I would say
hold
that for,
on.
yeah,
We will go there. Don't worry. I will not let you go. We will go in
but I
DBT.
think that there's one key part that people is not just about the mechanical computation,
Hmm.
because of course that is important. The fact is that when you are doing ETL, pretty much you do the computation only with the data that you have extracted, that you have there. So
Hmm.
you don't have all the data that you have in your platform. You just have what you have there. Otherwise, you have to extract also from your target platform. So you have to first read, add it to the calculation, then push it back. And so that's very costly because when you move a lot of data, while with the ELT, you are doing the calculation where you already have everything. You just need, in a way, to connect this. And I think this also is one key element to explain the difference. It's not just where the computation happens, but the data that you have available to do the computation. So it's easier in ELT to make smarter thing just because you have everything there.
Here the challenge is the processing of compute was used at a source system and source system performance were impacted. There are many other factors involved, so we won't go into that detail. I just wanted to picture the high level of ELT, ETL versus ELT because DBT is ELT. So now we go towards ELT and DBT. Okay, I have many questions as I told you. Okay, let's start from very basic. Is it a thick client or is it a thin client?
It's very thin client. What I actually say, so consider that one of my really interesting first software engineer back at Java times, where I worked, it was a tool to build J2E application from UML models.
Okay.
You might not rational rows. This was a little bit more advanced than rational rows. So, and the idea is cool. You just do a model, and this thing will generate everything. So the database, the all the front end, everything, so that you had a full working Java 2 application that you could write, read, and so on. The problem, what is that this was a really thick tool. So you were doing something at this level, there was a lot of stuff happening inside the tool, and then there was produced the code that was actually run. So the problem is that if, and you had very little to do here too, if you accepted what came out here as a standard. So in that mode, the fact that the tool was thick didn't really matter a lot. It actually was, oh, cool, I do little here, I get a good result that works here. But if you want to affect what happens here, because you might want to change the color, you want to change some rule, well, then you need to get into all this thickness and know what to change and where to change it. And so a thick tool is fine for a demo, where you just get what you have, what is produced. But if you have to work with a thick tool, you have a lot of knowledge to load into your head on top of what you need to make actually the final product. When you work with DBT, DBT is a very thin tool. It just adds very little on top of the SQL that you write. It's the very little that is boring, that it's time consuming to write, but it's logically very simple. I want to create a view. I want to create a table. I want to put the table in this schema or in that schema. It's just something that once you have the configuration, you don't think it's trivial to think, but boring to write. So it removes the part that it's easy to know what it's doing without affecting the result. And you have 100% control of what gets here, because you write SQL here, it gets SQL out here with a little bit of SQL around it. So that's why it's so easy to adopt.
Okay. Now my next question. It is still, I'm still outside the tool. I will go inside the tool. This is available on which clouds? It's a cloud tool, right?
Well, it's you can have there are two way to use DBT. There is DBT Core, that is pretty much just a Python application, and you can use wherever. You just install wherever you want.
Okay.
And then there is DBT Cloud, that is a software as a service application. So in that sense, you don't install it anywhere. As long as you have a browser that can connect to internet, you can just use it.
Okay.
So so in that sense, it's awesome because you can use it in any environment. It also connect with a huge amount of the databases. So all the major cloud ones, so all the also classical ones. So you have also for Oracle, SQL Server, what is Postgres, pretty
Database,
much.
yeah, there's a list. Yeah, I will put
So
that.
and then you can actually even write adapters to use on whatever database you want. But I would say all the major cloud are there, all the major legacy are there, and because it could make still sense. I have played for some time with using DBT, actually even DBT Cloud on my local Postgres, just for fun. But you can, because as long as you have a connection and you can reach the database, it just fires SQL. And that's what makes it so simple yet powerful.
Okay.
Because especially in database where you can do everything, even administration with SQL,
Yeah.
well, with DBT and the database, you can do whatever you want.
Okay. So this is a SaaS service, I would say, right?
Yes, it
Is
can
this?
be either local, Python-based tool, command line,
Mm,
Python-based. So you can either use command line or you can use as a Python library also. So you can even call it from Python if you really want. So this opens up a lot of possibilities, especially with the tools like Airflow, Prefect, that they can natively integrate at Python level and pass commands and so on. So it makes very easy to adopt in pretty much any stack that you have.
Okay. Okay.
I
So
would just use, if possible, the cloud version software as a service. So you don't have anything to install. All your users have the same experience. There is very good online editor, IDE, integrated development environment. So
they have a GUI as well.
yes,
They have GUI. So it's a SaaS service, but it is available on Google, Azure, and AWS, all cloud.
It's in the cloud. So you just connect to GetDBT and you use it, and then you configure the connection to your database. So your database, if you use Snowflake, you can have it on any cloud. If you use BigQuery, you generally have it on Google Cloud.
Yeah.
If you use one of the Microsoft Fabric or whatever, you generally have on Azure. If you use Redshift, you probably are on AWS. So, but you have the cloud, so software as a service, DBT cloud,
Hmm.
that then you can connect. And from the same DBT cloud, you can connect, for each project can connect to a totally different database, different platform.
Okay. Now you as you are mentioning SQL. So we are saying the transformation which we do in DBT, it is SQL compatible, is it? It's a
It's
the language is
so
SQL, is it?
Yes, the SQL, the language, of course, the mandatory language is SQL because that's what you want to execute on your target database.
Yeah.
But the real power of dbt is that you can mix and merge SQL
Mhm.
and some scripting based on Python. It's called Jinja. It's the same that is used in many other tools to. It's pretty much produce pages usually, like in tools to publish websites, and it is a templating engine so that you can use this Python-based syntax, like if, then, these kind of things, or running query and getting results that you can build then the SQL, so dynamically build the SQL that then is fired on top of your database, or you can do actions based on something. And this is, I think, that really the dimension that introduce something new compared to other tools that also generate or allow you to write SQL. The fact that you can have these macros, that is where you put this Jinja in at work, so mixing Python and SQL,